Aloha, welcome to Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers, interviews with people who have special insights into education from preschool all the way through adult education. I'm Jim Shawn, your host. We stream live every Wednesday at noon. We're on YouTube and the Hawaii Educational Policy Center. Today we're going to explore what an individual with knowledge and commitment and grit and determination can do to bring public policy to the public. We're interviewing education activist Vanessa Ott. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Jim.
Yeah. Now, the reason why you're on this show is because you are single-handedly recording the meetings of the State Board of Education. So we want to get into why, how, all of that, but first a little bit about your education is fascinating to me. It combines music with electrical engineering.
Yes. I got my public education up to high school in New Jersey, and then I went to the University of Illinois, and I had intended to become an English major, but at the University of Illinois, there's a lot of engineers. Mm-hmm. And I got very interested in engineering because of my love for music and hearing Jimi Hendrix and hearing electronic sounds and wanting to be able to make those sounds. And so I was fortunate that at the University of Illinois, they had something called the Electronic Music Labs. And they had a Buchla synthesizer and a Moog synthesizer and state-of-the-art recording electronics. Mm-hmm. And so I went and found out, what do I have to do to become an audio engineer? And there wasn't a program at the time. They had something called individual plans of study, and you could create your own major. So I took a template that two other people who had done the program made their own program that was a cross between music and electrical engineering. And I made my degree program, and it was approved, and I managed to get out of that within 4.5 years. But my education was delayed a bit because when I had been growing up as a girl who was very good at English, I had been discouraged in mathematics. Mm-hmm. I didn't even take calculus in high school. So by the time I got to college, I actually had to do some remediation. If I wanted to take engineering classes, I had to take calculus. So I had to kind of back it up, take about a year of general education classes. And then I studied in the electronic music labs and eventually came out of that with a lot of skills in audio engineering, and I also had my writing background. So my first job out of school was working for a magazine called Polyphony, which was for do-it-yourself electronic music hobbyists, people who built their own fuzz tones and vocoders and things like that. And this magazine at that time was to help them understand music electronics better. And it eventually got turned into a publication called Electronic Musician Magazine, and then I had a very long and varied career after that.
It sounds like what you were doing is part of what we might call STEM today: science, technology, engineering, and math. Does that fit into that category?
Yes, it does. In fact, though, some people have tried to call that STEAM and throw in an A for arts. And so I think I was doing STEAM and incorporating the music creativity with the science and technology of the electrical engineering, and then the artistic component in there, because I was attempting to create electronic music and make those sounds that were so avant-garde at that time.
And at that time, there was no internet, and many of the electronic things we think about today were not yet invented.
Yes.
So you're the audio engineer behind Jimi Hendrix in the concert. That's where you were heading.
Would have loved to have been. But yeah, no, I did eventually do some soundboard work and some studio work. But yeah, so that answers your question.
But then you became involved with education. So talk about that little journey.
Okay, well, the electronic thing had led through having my own video production company. And then after that, I wound up in the San Francisco Bay Area in the .com era. And that was when the internet was well, the internet actually existed before the World Wide Web. A lot of people think the internet started with the World Wide Web, but there was a whole internet, text-based internet that existed before the World Wide Web, which I was involved in very early in political activism. Actually, I started an organization with a couple other women in audio called Women's TechNet. And that was to connect women around the world who were into audio engineering, because we were very few and far between. We could probably name each other
So
at
both
that
of
time.
you were in this.
Yeah. It was like you knew who the people were, and that they were around the globe. And I had discovered this thing called email back in the 1990s, because I met somebody who was working for a nonprofit internet service provider called Institute for Global Communications. And they were very interested in helping nonprofit organizations use the internet to better facilitate their activist work. And I found out about this email thing, and I was like, whoa, this would be a great way for women in audio to communicate with each other. So we presented at the Audio Engineering Society in January 1990, and I was telling everybody what this cool email thing was, and the women technology people, they just picked up on it immediately. And so that communications network was born, but that was pre-web. So it was all done with text-based messages. So your question was, how did I wind up in education? I've had a very long life so far. So that, I had a career in computers then for quite a while in the San Francisco Bay Area. And a couple things happened in the early 2000s. One was that I got kind of burned out on the corporate technology thing. The latest, greatest thing. You always had to do the latest, greatest thing. And I just wanted to be able to use technology so that it was useful. I didn't want to always have to learn something new because it was the new thing. It was like, the old thing's working just fine. Let me do my creative thing or my activist thing with the old technology until I can't use it anymore. I'll move on to the new thing. I didn't want to always be involved in hawking the latest technology or software or whatever it was. And then also I became handicapped at that time. So I wanted to reevaluate. Oh, the other issue is back in the late 90s, we bought a timeshare in Hawaii. And Hawaii, it got harder and harder to leave every year. So I started asking around, what kind of careers, what do they need people to do here? And of the things that they needed at that time, they needed teachers and they needed nurses. Well, being handicapped, I wasn't going to make a very good nurse. So I had already been a teacher teaching adults. And people had always said, oh, you're so good with kids. And I wanted to work with high-need kids. I was more interested in that realm rather than, money and things, high-tech for the sake of high-tech. So then I decided to become a school teacher, and with the purpose of becoming a school teacher in Hawaii in a high-need place. And so I went back to school and got my teaching credential at California State University in the East Bay and made a beeline for Hawaii. In fact, the first job that I had in Hawaii, I didn't have much teaching experience except for my student teaching, but I had technology experience. And so Kealakehe Elementary School on the Big Island needed somebody who could do some half-time technology and some half-time resource teacher for the gifted and talented program. So that was how I got my foot into the Department of Education in Hawaii. But I had already purchased my property on the south point of the Big Island because I loved that community and I wanted to go teach there. And I thought I would do very well, but.
So I'm detecting a pattern here, a context which says maybe this isn't for you. A response, maybe it is. Using technology and in your initiative to create jobs, create businesses, create programs, really, and technology being a pathway into education in this case.
Technology is a pathway into education, yes, sort of, because, well, I didn't want to be in the technology world, but the technology as a pathway into education, there were a lot of things that I could do when I started to become a teacher that my coworkers couldn't do because they didn't understand the communications, or they didn't know how to use the technology to optimize their teaching. Matter of fact, one of my professors was very thankful that I had been in her class because I was able to teach her so much about how to use a computer. And this was around, I was in school in 2004 for my teaching credential. So it was still kind of new to a lot of people in education.
Yeah, so you end up on the Big Island in an elementary school. And what was that like for you? I mean, you would come from the mainland and all these technology things going on, cutting edge, a little bit of music, and you end up in this elementary school helping with their IT, but also teaching a regular grade?
Well, my first year was helping with the IT, and that was up in Kona, and so that was a very different experience. But when I got my first full-time teaching position, it was in third grade, and it was very challenging. I'll have to say, of all the jobs that I have had throughout my lifetime, it was my least favorite. And it was not because of teaching kids. It was not because of the kind of work, but it was certainly not what I had expected as a teacher. As a teacher, I thought I purposely wanted to become a elementary teacher so that I could teach a whole bunch of different subjects, because I felt like the perspective that I had had from, you know, being a poet when I was a young kid, and then the technology and being a musician and how all these different things work together, I thought I could give them a really good foundation of and an interest in all these different subjects. But by the time I got here, well, actually when I was in college, they said, there's this new thing called No Child Left Behind. And teaching is not going to be the way that you knew it when you were in school. Get used to it, because it's not going to go away. And it was kind of in full force by the time I got to Na'alehu. And I felt very stifled. For example, I had thought when I come to Hawaii, I would bring my technology information and knowledge, and they would receive it and be so thrilled. They just didn't know about it. Well, that really didn't turn out to be the case. One of the first things I said is, hey, how about if you have a schedule like the week before the week starts, so everybody knows what they're supposed to do, and then we can distribute it electronically. Well, that went over like a lead balloon. No, it's not, we haven't done it that way, and da-da-da. So I found that there was a lot of resistance in Hawaii to new things.
Okay, well, we are talking with an education activist, Vanessa Ott, about her experiences with technology, and we'll be right back in 1 minute.
Hi, I'm Donna Blanchard. I'm the host of Center Stage here on Think Tech Hawaii. Center Stage airs every Wednesday at 2 o'clock, and of course you can check out our archives on YouTube or on Think Tech Hawaii anytime you like. Why should you do that? Because this is an arts show that I believe is making a difference in lives. We talk with artists of various ilk. We talk with painters and writers, playwrights, novelists, poets, sculptors, dancers, you name it, directors, actors, of course. And we don't only talk about what people do, but we talk about how they do it. And my favorite part of the conversation, we talk about why they do it. And it's really common on this show to hear people say, wow, I didn't think about it that way. And it's very common to hear people afterwards who have seen the show say the same thing. And I hear all the time that people are inspired by the conversations that we have. So Why don't you join us and be inspired too? That's Center Stage on Wednesdays at 2 o'clock. We'll see you center stage.
Welcome back to Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, Reformers, talking with Vanessa Ott about her initial experiences in our Department of Education on the Big Island. And you ultimately became very active in trying to film and make accessible meetings of the Board of Education. But how did your initial experiences with public education maybe lead you to that?
Okay, well, some of I was having a lot of difficulty figuring out who made decisions. Because when I was growing up, the Board of Education and the PTA were very important functions in the local community. The people would go and bring their kids, and I was one of the kids who got brought along. They would go to Board of Education meetings. They would go to PTA meetings. They would talk about what was happening at the school. They would see if there was a problem, and they would try and find a solution. And so it was possible to get things done. When I was in Na'alehu and starting to experience some problems with policies that were made somewhere in Honolulu by people I never saw, I realized that there was definitely a disconnect between the policymakers and the people who actually had to carry out the policy. So when I finally decided not to be a teacher anymore, it was not because I was fed up with education. It was because I knew that education in Hawaii could be so much more than what it was. So I still have my home in Na'alehu. And my husband and I got an apartment in Honolulu because if you want to interact with the Board of Education, you have to be in Honolulu.
You have to be here, yeah.
And I'll also say the VOG was another motivating force.
Yes.
I can't live in the VOG and not Alehu 365 days a year because it was really very unhealthy. So it was like all the signs were pointing, go to Honolulu and do something. So I went to Honolulu and started going to Board of Education meetings to find out how they worked. I didn't even understand how the process worked, and there was nothing online, no information. And I started realizing that there was just kind of a little problem there. A couple things. Things would happen in the meetings, and nobody statewide seemed to know what had happened. By that time, it was already an appointed board. The appointed board started in 2011, I believe, and I moved, got my apartment in Honolulu in 2012. And so there were definitely some difficulties that I could see needed to be overcome, but it was like this onion, you know, you're peeling back the onion and there's a little bit of a, you say, oh, there's where the solution is going to be, and you go, oh, no, wait a minute, it's deeper than that. For example, one problem was, and still continues to be somewhat, it's not as bad as it was when I first started coming, is knowing what they were going to talk about before the meeting started. The old agenda back in 2011, it was just a few lines with nothing explaining really what was going on. So now they at least try to get some of the presentations that are going to be discussed at the next meeting online. So there are some improvements, and I think it's because there's people like me who keep saying, hey, wait a minute, there's something not so good here. So another problem that I noticed with the Board of Education, and this still continues to be a problem, is that most of the work is done in their 4 committees. They have Student Achievement Committee, Finance and Infrastructure Committee, an Audit Committee, and a Human Resources Committee. And so most of the bulk of the work is done in those committees. But they only meet like once a month. The Audit Committee only meets once a quarter. And they have a meeting, but their minutes don't come out publicly until after the next meeting. So you go wait a whole month. They say, okay, we're going to discuss item B at our next meeting. Well, nobody in the whole state knows that they're going to do that. until the next meeting comes up, or what they were going to say. And then they're going to discuss it and make the decision that day, and nobody really has an opportunity for public input. And where I come from, the people got something to say, and they're going to get up and say it. So I figured, well, you know, how can the people even get up and say anything here, because they don't even know what's going on at these meetings. Mm-hmm. They had also changed the meetings from nighttime meetings to holding them in the middle of the day, which was very strange to me, because how can teachers and people who are involved working in the education system be involved in the Board of Education? They're policy makers if the meetings are done during the day. So I just felt like there was a little bit of problem there. And then in Hawaii, you have the huge problem of it's a state-run board. So there's only one Board of Education, and it's in Honolulu. And in Hawaii, so many of the people can't even drive there, even if they had the day off. So I started to realize that communications, something I've been involved in many different forms of communication, be it music, video, internet, could really help Hawaii be more connected to their board. And so I started to think, well, hey, we should just videotape them. It can't be that hard to videotape them. Mm-hmm. At first, I asked the board to videotape themselves, but I didn't really get a response to that. So my teacher in me comes out, and you model something. If you want somebody to be able to do it, you have to model it for them. So I started going and just got, this just occurred to me last December, so it's not quite a year old. It occurred to me that we should just start recording them. I got a video camera sometime in January, February, and by the time I got back to the Big Island, or not the Big Island, by the time I got back to Honolulu, I just started recording and sticking it up on YouTube, and then made a web page and said, okay, here's the links to all the videos, to show the Board of Education how easy it is to do, and that you could really do it with somebody just kind of pointing a camera, and with a camera and a tripod for less than $200. And all these free services that we have, like YouTube and free websites, they don't need a free website, they have their own website. But how easy it would be to just get the information out there so that people could see what's going on and know well in advance of the next meeting what's going to be talked about, what was talked about at the last meeting, not have to wait for minutes, because frankly, I've had to ask them to correct their minutes a couple times because they misquoted my testimony. I give a lot of testimony, but some things were not right. And so I was like, well, if you record the thing, you've got a perfect exact copy of what happened.
So when you proposed or suggested to the board, maybe you could do this too, or maybe you could do this before you did it, did they respond to you at all? Did they give you a reason? Was it money? What was it?
You know, I can't remember the exact sequence of events as to whether they responded to it or not.
But you've been doing this now for a little while.
I've been doing this for a few months.
And is there any curiosity about, oh, what are you doing?
Yeah, actually, well, board member DeLima came up to me one time and said, oh, nice camera that you have. And I started to talk to him about, well, why doesn't the board do this themselves? Yeah. And it goes back to, for them, I think, who's going to man the camera? Who's going to be the camera operator? And for some reason, they think that the 3 staff members that they have in those meetings can't share their duties enough so that somebody can run the camera. I don't think it's that difficult to do, and I think if folks are multitasking, it should be easier to do. For example, the person who is sitting there and taking the minutes, they could sit there and run the camera and later transcribe the minutes from the video recording. And I think that that completely solves the problem of who's going to do the recording. So they haven't responded. Like I probably sent 1 or 2 letters about why don't you do this. Maybe I only sent them 1 letter, but recently had a meeting with someone who's been helping me out a little bit more lately, Peter Bowman, and I had a meeting with Chair, the Chair of the Board of Education, who's Mr. Mizumoto. And I think they just think that it's overwhelming, it's just one more thing that they have to do, and they don't see the value in it. There might even be some hesitation, like maybe we don't want people to know what's going on at the meeting. That's not as bad as I think it was a couple years ago, but also I'll have to say when I first started bringing my camera, one of the board members says, well, watch what you say now, because now we're being recorded. So it was like before, it didn't matter what they did. It was only a few people sitting there, and who's going to believe me if I say, oh my goodness, you can't believe what they just said in this meeting. So anyway, I think there's been a little bit of interest, but I don't understand why they just don't embrace it. Probably for the same reason I don't understand when I came to Hawaii and I had all these tech skills. They just didn't like say, wow, this could solve so many problems. I think one of the thoughts is also, well, none of the other boards do this, so why should we? Well, if everybody thought that way, then nothing new would ever happen, and that's not necessarily the best way to move forward.
So you mentioned briefly that almost nobody's attending the meetings anyway. Are you one of the few kind of community members that is able to come to a meeting at noon or whenever? Yes.
I think there are, well, anybody who has a job, they can't go. A day job, they can't go. So of the people left, then are people who have to be interested in education. That really narrows down the pot a bit. So you had people, let's start with people who are interested in education. Now those of the people who could attend because they live in Oahu and they have the day off, that's a much smaller group. Then you take of those people, the people who believe that they can change anything in Hawaii, and that's like,
And then there's the parking.
Yes, the parking is a little bit of a problem. So you got to feed that meter.
Yeah. So it does seem like the deck is sort of stacked against a culture in which there's an open community-based dialogue on education policy, an invitation to come in, or at least a way to communicate what has happened in the past.
Yeah, there's a culture of that, and the culture has grown up out of just the way the geography is, the way the history has been of, certain owners, and definitely separated from the workers, and the workers on the plantations fighting against each other. I mean, that was purposely done so that the power structure could maintain their power. So I think there's definitely some cultural things that are working against it. But there is one really, really great thing working in favor of change, and that's the new generation.
We will discuss the new generation of videotaping, policymaking, and students after 1 minute.
Aloha, my name is Roy Kodani, and every Wednesday at 1 p.m. I host Life in the Law, which is a segment of Think Tech Hawaii. And basically, I host guests who have some relevancy to law in Hawaii. And I hope you will continue to tune in. If you have questions, tweet us at Think Tech Hawaii. Mahalo.
Aloha, this is Alice Lee Hagan from Think Tech Hawaii Business Education Spotlight. My show is a bi-weekly show on Thursday from 3 to 4 p.m. We invite interesting people, entrepreneurs, fascinating leaders who contribute to the social economic well-being of our state. Please tune in to my show, Business Education Spotlight, Think Tech Hawaii, bi-weekly, Thursday, 3 to 4 p.m. Aloha.
Welcome back to our discussion with education community activist Vanessa Ott, who has been sharing observations of what she found when she started going to the State Board of Education and how technology might help. You mentioned that, you know, for a lot of people, they don't even know how to do their cell phones really well, right? So could you describe just very briefly the technology you're using to put video record of all our board members' board meetings online?
Sure, it's quite simple. It's a very inexpensive little video camera like you would have to film your kids.
So it's not a cell phone per se, it is a...
No, yeah, I bought a little video camera. Actually to film my band, but
Okay.
I thought, hey, I can use it for this too. So
You have a band, we'll get to that.
we don't play live yet, not yet. Anyway, so it's just a very inexpensive little camera and a very lightweight, I need lightweight because of my handicap, but a very lightweight tripod. And I just push the record button, and when they show a presentation up on the screen, I turn the tripod and zoom in. And then when it goes back to people, I turn it back to the board and I zoom back out. Sometimes if somebody's talking, I zoom in and out. It's very complicated.
Okay. Well, what about the audio, though? I mean, your camera's kind of in the back of the room, and they're way up there mumbling in front of the microphone.
Oh, yes. Well, the way the audio works is whatever somebody in the room can hear, you can hear. And the level's kind of low. So on the website where I post the links, I say you might want to listen on with a pair of headphones.
Okay.
But a lot of times I'm sitting in the meeting and somebody's not talking into the microphone, or if they can't hear, I'll just shout out from the back of the room, can't hear, and then that usually triggers them to talk into the microphone, or one of the staff members from the board will come over and kind of push the microphone into front of somebody's mouth. They do say in the beginning of their meetings, last couple of months they've been broadcasting live through WebEx, but it's audio only. So at the beginning of their meetings, they do remind them to please speak into the microphone. But as they get into their discussion, the chair should probably remind some of these people to speak into the microphone, but I think it's still kind of new.
Well, you just referred to a techno leap. They're actually recording their voices at the meetings now?
No, they're not recording.
Oh,
They're
not
broadcasting live
They're broadcasting live, all
Yes.
right? So if you're not there,
or listening in.
would that be very difficult for them to record what they're broadcasting?
I don't think so. I mean, the technology to do these kinds of things is all over the place. I did notice that they're using a service called WebEx, and I'm pretty certain that, you know, for a fee, you can get WebEx to probably store a recording of the audio. But I always wonder in Hawaii why they're always contracting things out to people that they could very easily do themselves. They could just buy, if they only wanted the audio, they could just turn the video part off of the camera and just record the audio and stick just the audio online. But there's many, if you're going to do that, why not have the video?
So you've been observing the board itself. Do you have any comments from an educational, not technical perspective of what you've observed in these meetings and how the board interacts, and, you know, do they value data and studies, or is it anecdotal, or, you know, what are you finding with them?
Well, considering my own personal testimony, when I first started coming and trying to tell them about experiences that we're having, and problems at the school and why we needed better policies on certain things, I really felt like I was considered and treated like the lone crazy lady. And, you know, as soon as my 2 minutes were up, you get 2 minutes to testify.
Yeah.
As soon as my 2 minutes were up, they used to have the most obnoxious blaring sound that would go, you know, I would jump out of my skin, and it would be, thank you for your testimony, and I would never hear anything. But I think that the board members have come to realize that I personally am not going to go away. So maybe they listen to some of the things I have to say better. I don't think that it should be that way, though, because somebody may only have one opportunity to come to the board and really tell them something that is very important. It took them a lot to get there. I think they should evaluate every idea based on how good that idea is. Now, again, technology could be used to do surveys. I've been trying to urge them to do surveys. A lot of times I will say, this is what's happening in some of the schools that I know of, and they go, well, I don't think you're right. Well, why should we be having that argument? Just go do a survey. The technology exists where they could do valid surveys. I'm not talking like a Survey Monkey survey where somebody can vote 10, 20, 50 times if they keep going in. But they could survey their employees and find out exactly really what's going on. Because I think that what happens at the school level doesn't always get passed up. And what I have observed about the board is that they're really only listening to the top level. And I have my own theories about how somebody gets to be at that top level. And you certainly don't get to be at the top level by being a progressive fighter. So there's kind of a confirmation bias that happens. Now, you asked me about the technology. The Board of Education, they have a website. They have a new director who's really done some marvelous things with that website in the last couple of years. But before that, just very much resistance to change. Like, hey, this would be really good to do this with the website or have this on the website. And it was very resistant to change. I feel like with the new appointments and the new director, things are maybe getting a little bit better, but there's still just this resistance to doing something new and different, even though everybody I talk to can say, oh, you know, hey, what a great idea. Put the Board of Education videos online. I can't think of any reason not to do it except expense. But you can do it so cheaply these days because there's so many free services, and a camera could cost less than $200. They even have a camera mounted in the room. It's way up high, and I don't know where the video feed goes. Probably goes into another room, but it doesn't have to be that complicated or expensive.
I have observed that somebody could, or another board member who was stuck on another island, could sort of Skype themselves into the meeting or testify. Have you seen anything like that?
Well, I haven't seen them doing any kind of video feed, but they have been offering the WebEx service, and I assume that there's some way to send in questions, but I don't really know. A board member, though, would have to actually if they want to follow Robert's Rules of Order, they have to have a voice connection, a real-time voice connection to be a participant in the meeting. I haven't seen them do that, though I suppose they could, and then they wouldn't have to be flying board members over. Though Hawaii's been having a little problem with their slow internet speeds, so that could potentially get in the way. And in some ways, there's really that face-to-face communication is, I think, a little more effective than the video technology, but it could be used to do that.
It sounds like you're going and suggesting to them to go well beyond what is absolutely required under the Sunshine Law.
Yes, definitely, because the Sunshine Law does not require. I would like to change the Sunshine Law. So everybody out there, I'd like to change the Sunshine Law so that it actually is required that every state in the board has to put a video recording of their meeting on their website, because that's really the only way that people throughout Hawaii are going to be able to be connected and involved with their government.
Yes.
should I say something about BOE Watch?
Sure, yes, please do.
Okay, well, I realized that one person alone was never going to change the Board of Education's mind. So I set up a Facebook group called BOE Watch. So if you have a Facebook ID and you go to Facebook, just type in BOE space Watch, W-A-T-C-H. And it's a group, and you have to join the group. And to me, that was the best way to have people vote for this. So when somebody, we're not going to get solicitations for money because we're not asking for money. All we're asking for is that you support the idea of putting Board of Education videos on their website. Have them record it. See, now I can't always be there, but I would watch every single video if it was on there, you know, if I wasn't there, because I'm very involved and I'm very interested and I have some good ideas. But if I don't know what has happened, then I can't testify the next time this issue comes up because I don't have enough information and I don't like to go spouting my mouth off when I don't know something. So anyway, we have now 108 people who have signed up for BOE Watch since I think it was around February. Actually, I created the group in December of last year, but I didn't really kickstart it until I got an article published in Civil Beat about using technology. And people have started to join on and you know, started to help. If the Board of Education really doesn't think that their people can do it, I'm sure that with this group we could get enough volunteers to make this happen. But right now, the barrier is in the mind of the Board of Education. As soon as they open that up, we could do it.
Now, one infers that our regular media is not interested in this. I mean, I've been at board meetings where there was no media in attendance, but it seems to me that this would be an extension of certainly radio, TV, but you know, any media outlet. Have you had any discussions with them about why aren't you doing this?
Well, you mean other media? Have I had discussions with other media?
I'm talking about the TV stations or the...
Well, the thing is, a TV station, they don't really have the luxury of having a 2.5-hour meeting online. They're going to go for the sound bites. I've seen TV crews come in and they go for the sound bite, but they just don't have the airtime that they can do this. So other people have suggested using Alelo, and I did try to contact them, but they didn't contact me back. But the model that I understand from Alelo is that it's cable television. And really what I'm looking for is an on-demand recording. Right, you go to the Board of Education website. You don't have to find a third party. You go to Board of Education, I want to see this meeting. Here's the agenda. It's all there together. I think it's something that our government has a responsibility to do in the 21st century, is to use these technology tools to maximize public engagement and democracy.
There you go. An excellent way to end this discussion. There are many groups you see beginning to develop to try to create a dialogue like Think Tech Hawaii in realms where the usual media or the usual government is a few steps behind. We thank you for what you're doing. This is Think Tech Hawaii's Education Movers, Shakers, and Reformers. We'll be back again next week. Aloha.